Asking for more news? Srivas Pandit asked. Yesterday, Acharya fasted. He is surviving only because he is destined to. Please show yourself to him and save him. If someone else had punished him, he would have tolerated it. O Lord, you alone are our life and soul. Yesterday, in lamentation, we thought that without you, O Lord, why should we maintain our lives? You have given punishment like you said you would. Now please, come and show your mercy. After hearing Srivas's words, the most merciful Lord went to see Advaita Acharya. When the Lord came and found Advaita Acharya practically unconscious, he considered himself a great offender. After previously receiving the Lord's mercy, Advaita would wander about like he was intoxicated with pride, but after being punished by the Lord, his body trembled. On seeing his condition, the merciful Lord said, "Oh, Acharya, get up and see. It is I, Vishvambar." Advaita was ashamed to say anything. In ecstatic love, he meditated on the Lord's lotus feet. The Lord again said, "Get up, Acharya, don't worry. Get up and perform your duties." Advaita said, "O Lord, you inspired me to act the way I did. Whatever you are saying to me now is all an external show." Who can understand their relationship? You always treat me in such a way that I become proud, and as a result I suffer. O Lord, you have awarded everyone else the topmost mood of service, but you have shown me reverence. You yourself inspire me, and then you punish me. You speak one thing, and then think another. You are my life, wealth, body, and mind, yet still you give me misery. This is your opulence, O Lord. Please give me the mood of service and keep me at your feet as the son of your maidservant. I'm going to read the purport. Advaita Acharya, this is Bhaktisiddhanta paraphrasing. Advaita Acharya had said, "The punishment that was awarded to me for the unauthorized activities of considering all the devotees my servants and receiving respect from the people of this world is just an indication of my misfortune. It is simply the opulence of your mercy that you have awarded me distress. Even though you have already taken everything away from me, my only request is that you refrain from this and always see me as your servant. As the maidservant's son, live in the house of the opulent householders. In the same way, you should always consider me your servant. This is my request." Next text. On hearing the words of Advaita, Sri Gaurasundara spoke to him in front of all the Vaishnavas. "Listen, O Acharya, I'm telling you the truth. Just consider this example that I am narrating. When a royal administrator goes before the king, the guards place a request before him. And when the royal administrator meets the king and conveys the guards' request, he collects their wages and then distributes them to the guards, who, along with their families, survive on that. If such a royal administrator, before whom the guards place their request, makes an offense, then, by the order of the king, those same guards do not hesitate to execute him." I don't understand it. How about you? Here's Bhaktisiddhanta's explanation. When a chief administrator goes to see the king, the guards request him to collect their wages for them. After this administrator conveys the guard's request before the king and collects the wages for their maintenance from the king, he distributes them among the guards, who maintain their family members with those wages. That part was easy. If such an influential person commits any offense to the king, then, by the order of the king, those same guards do not hesitate to take his life. Next text, Mahaprabhu speaking. On one hand, the royal administrator is entrusted with the responsibility of ruling the kingdom, and on the other hand, he is killed for his offense. In the same way, Krishna, the King of Kings, while Brahma and Shiva, the Creator and Annihilator, are his servants. He gives the power to create, and so if he awards punishment, no one can protest. Consorts like Lakshmi and personalities like Shiva also receive punishments from Krishna. Yet the Lord always forgives the offenses of his servants. If Krishna punishes one for his offense, then I tell you that he is the servant of Krishna birth after birth. Get up, take bath, and perform your worship. Then take your meal without anxiety. On hearing the Lord's words, Advaita became joyful, realizing that he was punished as a servant. He laughed. Mission accomplished, in other words. Advaita exclaimed, "Now I can say you are my Lord." Then he danced in ecstasy. When Advaita Acharya heard the Lord's words of assurance, he was overwhelmed in ecstasy and forgot the previous distress he had felt due to separation. All the Vaishnavas felt great ecstasy, and Haridas and Nityananda then began to laugh. Due to misfortune, some people are deprived of relishing the topics of these most ecstatic pastimes of the Lord. Sri Advaita Prabhu is the recipient of Lord Chaitanya's love. Due to illusion, some people consider such opulence as insignificant. Do not think that, quote, servant implies insignificance. The Lord does accept one as a servant if he is less fortunate. What does that mean? Bhaktisiddhanta explains. Ignorant, materialistic Mayavadis think that to become Prabhu or master in this world is most desirable, because a servant has to suffer like an obedient dog. Therefore, a master is always comparatively more respectable than a servant. Those who have no intelligence to discriminate between the characteristics of Vaikuntha and the characteristics of the material world are certainly unfortunate. That's the explanation. And devoid of piety. Those unfortunate people who consider the ordinary demigods as equal to the devotees of the Lord, the deity form of Vishnu, as equal to a piece of stone that is trodden under the feet of cows and asses, the spiritual master as a mortal being, the holy names and mantras of Vishnu as ordinary words, the devotees of Vishnu as belonging to a particular mundane community, the water that has washed the feet of Vishnu or the Vaishnavas as ordinary water, and the Vaishnavas as belonging to a particular status in accordance with their non-devotional qualities. In other words, those who categorize the devotees of Vishnu according to their varnashram status, their age, their beauty, or their wealth, are bound by 8 material ropes and oppressed by 6 types of material miseries. The consideration that objects of material enjoyment are equal to the remnants of the Lord takes one to hell. Such classes of people try to equate the service of the Lord with the service of material objects. Since such impersonal conceptions of such unfortunate persons prevent them from realizing that the service of the Lord is eternal, full of knowledge and uninterrupted ecstasy, and that the service of the Supreme Lord is the property of all spirit souls. They are deprived of spiritual enjoyment. It goes on, another page and a half. Okay. First, one attains liberation. Then his material bondage is destroyed. Then he can become the servant of Lord Krishna. Commentators on the scriptures explain that liberated souls worship Krishna, who enjoys transcendental pastimes. The servants of Krishna have the power of Krishna. If they commit any offense, Krishna punishes them. Some neophytes consider such devotees of Krishna as insignificant and constantly quarrel with them. Know for certain that they are all most sinful. Therefore, they do not actually support any Vaishnava. Anyone who has even the slightest doubt that Gaurachandra is the Lord of all is sinful, and his devotion is not pure. Some instruct that their ass and fox-like disciples go and meditate on me as Ramachandra. There can be nothing superior to becoming the servant of Lord Chaitanya, who has the power to create, maintain, and annihilate. Lord Balaram supports unlimited universes, yet he is the servant of the Lord. What then to speak of ordinary persons? All glories to Nityananda Haladar, whose mercy the glories of Lord Chaitanya manifest. By whose mercy the glories of Lord Chaitanya manifest. By his mercy, one develops attachment for Lord Chaitanya. Whatever I speak is due to his mercy. Sri Gaurasundra is the Lord of my Lord. I constantly keep this conviction in my heart. Accepting Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu as my life and soul, I, Vrindavan Das, sing the glories of their lotus feet. Kind of mysterious, huh? If I had to explain that example of the administrator of the king, on the one hand, requesting wages and then distributing the wages, that's fine. But if he, the administrator to the king, makes an offense to the king will order the servants of the king to kill him. And how does that explain Advaitacharya's? The deduction, therefore, is the Lord has accepted me as his servant. Does anybody can explain that puzzle and how the pieces fit together? Because I don't understand it. I do understand the mood that Lord Chaitanya, he was feeling, so let's go back. He was feeling no ecstasy, because he had dealt with atheists. And he was wanting to overcome that lack of feeling of ecstasy by Sankirtan. But even with Sankirtan, he was not feeling ecstasy and feeling sad. And then Advaitacharya made this other remark, saying, I'm not getting ecstasy. Nityananda, he's getting ecstasy. Srivas and I are not getting ecstasy. It's very puzzling. You want to say?
I was just thinking that maybe when the serpent is chastised, then it truly means, even though it seems a very harsh chastisement, but it truly means that then that person is a servant.
Yes.
So in the same way, when the king has them ordered to be killed, then that means that is showing that that man is truly belonging to the king. In the same way, when the Lord chastises me, then
okay, that makes sense.
But it's a quite harsh chastisement.
Yeah. If he makes any sense, kill him.
Yes.
No, that's extreme, but it makes the point. There's a really nice section in, there's a really nice section in I'll Build You a Temple, Giriraj Maharaj's book. Twice it happens. Navadvipa Swami was cooking for Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was very, chastising him, and how to take it when the spiritual master is chastising. Because anybody that knows Navadvipa Swami, he's an intense person himself, but to chastise Navadvipa Swami is like death or something. And Prabhupada said it's a sign of acceptance. Then in another place, he was commenting that people that have no one correcting them, they're most unfortunate. Going here, going there, doing this, doing that, no master, most unfortunate. And when one has a master, one of the signs of being in the position of master is correcting. And sometimes the correction is chastisement. It's kindness. And that pastime is very clear. That the name of Advaitacharya's personal secretary, who went with Paramananda Puri to go join Lord Chaitanya ahead of everybody else, because Advaitacharya was having a big celebration at Shantipur, always back from South India tour. Who was that? His name? Advaitacharya's personal servant or secretary, who knew that Advaitacharya, because of being a secretary, that he had a debt to the king. So he wrote a letter to the king, a little note, saying, Advaitacharya is the personality Godhead. Please forgive him for this debt. Please excuse the debt that he owes you. Lord Chaitanya intercepted the note, or somehow got a hold of the note, and said, I don't want to see him. And then when then the servant told Advaitacharya when he came, you're not going to see me. He said, you're so fortunate. He'll never do that to me. You know what I had to do to get chastised by him? I had to teach him personalism. And then the Lord got on my case. But you're so fortunate. You didn't even have to do some tricks like that. So no, stop. Don't misunderstand the chastisement. This is mercy. And then Advaitacharya came and complained, why are you giving him your mercy? Like this. And the Lord Chaitanya laughed and said, well, bring him here. Oh, now you're doing it double. And then the Lord instructed, this is a lesson for everyone. Don't accept money from a materialistic person because you become contaminated. Kamalakanta Vishwas. Kamalakanta Vishwas. Thank you. But it's a principle. It's a hard principle, but it's a principle that Prabhupada lived by. And many of us that have persons that are accountable to us, it's really hard. I find it really hard to, chastise, and mainly because people can't take it. One devotee said, you never chastise me. Why? Because you can't take it. But those that can take it, then that shows something. I mean, this is part of the message here. They're accepted as a servant, and here's the master. He's strengthening the bond of affection by that chastisement. Hari Sori told me a Prabhupada story once, that Prabhupada had a habit or a regulation that at a very specific time, if my memory is right, it was at 12 o'clock he would take a bath, and after taking his bath, he would sit down, chant Gayatri, and as soon as he was finished chanting Gayatri, he wanted hot prasadam. And one of the things he expected of the hot prasadam was that there were puris that were like a football, puffed up. And then he would poke his finger in the top of the puffed up puri, and some hot air would come out, and then he would break off a piece from the hot chapati and eat sabji with the hot chapati piece. So one day the palika was cooking and the chapati wouldn't puff up. So he called her from the kitchen and raised his voice, and she left the room crying. And then Prabhupada turned to the other devotees, smiling and saying, I can't chastise lady because they can't take it, but Palika can take it. Another Prabhupada story from Hari Sori is Prabhupada's standard of cleanliness was otherworldly. It wasn't just wasn't obsession, it was just otherworldly. And when he corrected someone, Hari Sori became his personal servant. And when he did the first thing that wasn't correct, Prabhupada explained how it's to be done. Not like that, it's like this. And then Hari Sori explained, Prabhupada expected, and after making that instruction in a very, gentle way, it would be corrected. And if it wasn't corrected, and it happened a second time, he would raise his voice because he wanted the correction. He wanted the disciple to correct, not just like he was attached or something, but he wanted the disciple to be obedient. And if it happened a third time, Prabhupada didn't say anything. He said, but his upper lip started to tremble, like anger. But it wasn't material. And that happened with Hari Sori 3 times, and his lip was trembling, and he started crying. saying, Prabhupada, I'm this mlecha, low-born person. I don't have, he described, it was a minor thing, but he put his hand on something. He was back and forth between the kitchen and Prabhupada's table, and he put his hand somewhere where he shouldn't have put his hand, and Prabhupada corrected him and did it again and did it again. He didn't say what happened after that, but he certainly stayed on as Prabhupada's servant for a long time. But he was very demanding. It was good fortune that he was so demanding. Good fortune of those who could take it, and not so good for those who couldn't take it. Any comments or discussion in the short section?
Just wanted to share some reflection about what you said and how Prabhupada always says that, following is so much more glorious, like you said, than being a master, and how much satisfaction and love you feel when we follow, when we are servants, in other words, rather than masters. It's such a wonderful point, because in the story of Kardamuni and Devahuti, there's oftentimes a lot of criticism from devotees where they say that why is Prabhupada talking in the purport so much about women being, should do this or that, and not so much about the men. And then Prabhupada explains how it's so much glorious, like, that following is compared to the disciple versus the guru as master. So I just, it's such a wonderful deep point, and that is why when Prabhupada makes statements which may be controversial, but not having understood the deeper point of how his chastisement or anything that we consider so-called negative against, it's so much, when we look at it from that depth, deep point, that how Prabhupada is actually glorifying that position, of following, how glorious a position of a disciple is. And that's why there's so much emphasis of that in the Shastra versus the duties of a spiritual master. But there's more emphasis on the duties of a disciple. And how that position, and that's, I feel how Advaita Acharya was feeling that lack, that when one is a servant, there's so much joy and ecstasy in being chastised, and because that love, one can see that love. And I remember in my own life in Boise, how when I was serving sannyasis, I would oftentimes get chastised and corrected and chastised, and really some very strong things, and how much I would feel, even though it sometimes would be devastating, but at the same time, I just felt so much more connected and so much more appreciated.
I would never be able to chastise you. Even if I saw something, I wouldn't say it. Not possible.
And I kind of miss that, Maharaj, now.
Yeah.
It's really...
You're going to keep missing it, at least. Yeah, I'm not going to do it. You go back to Boise or something.
Well, sometimes we did feel that it was a lot of it, but but at the same time, there was so
Maybe
much...
there wasn't so many, you just remembered a lot.
No, actually we don't remember. We just remember the good part, Maharaj. Just how service was so beautiful.
Give me an example. Who chastised you heavily?
Oh, there was a
One
few.
example, not 10.
Oh, Ganapati Swami was like that.
Ganapati Swami. Okay.
He was coming to Boise like 3 times a year. So, and spending, he was always in his van, traveling through and all that. And we were like, I just really appreciated him, though.
Yeah, he's
so wonderful.
So
he's
how did
so
he
wonderful.
chastise you? For what? What'd you do?
Well, Maharaj, everything was wrong. the place was not clean enough, and the prashadam was not good enough. You do rasabhas, you mix Western with Eastern, and it was everything. And then Chandramauli Maharaj came and chastised one time heavily the pizza. He liked pizza, and he said that why can't you just make either Western, or, why does it have to be a little Indian there? And it just. Yeah, Maharaj, everything. And it was so nectarian. It was just... it was just so wonderful. It's just when they had the Vyas Puja and everything.
You're a special person. Can I ask you another question besides who chastised you and so what they said?
Yeah.
When you are you asked the question, like all the rest of us are asked, about demeaning statements Prabhupada makes about women? Are you asked that question, and how do you answer that question?
Well, it's many different ways depending on who the person I'm talking to.
Okay, a young Western person, and they're reading, and they get like all bent out of shape because how can he's an elevated person? How can he speak like this about women?
Well, to somebody who's actually into Krishna consciousness already, I would say something like what I just said, that how, it's such a glorious thing, to serve, and one has to feel that joy in service.
But what does that have to do with the demeaning remarks about women?
Well, people say that because, how Prabhupada sometimes, says things that people don't like, and not having enough faith in Prabhupada's intention and what Prabhupada is trying to give us, people misunderstand. And so we have to correct that, because there's nothing that Prabhupada says is wrong, really. So one has to defend that in a way, because, and put it in the right perspective, in other words.
So what you're saying here is, for persons who are, sadhakas and practicing devotees, then when Prabhupada says demeaning things about women, it's actually glorifying their position of being in a wonderful capacity of being a servant.
Well, first of all, Prabhupada is not really demeaning the women. He's not really demeaning the women.
What's he doing?
Well, he's talking about
glorifying.
Not glorifying Maharaj, but it's more like the psychophysical, condition that we have, which comes with different makeup of the body. It's not something, that spiritually that one is lacking,
How do you deal with questions like that when they come? And I want to hear what you had to say. When people ask that question, you just like throw your hands up in the air and say, I like kirtan.
One thing that I thought about is understanding culturally where Prabhupada came from.
Yeah.
That might help to understand the context in which his statements about women are spoken. Yeah, I feel like that's the best I can do. Understanding the context might help.
So that line of logic is what some people say, Prabhupada was from a certain era and a certain, cultural influence, and that's the place, the cultural influence place from which Prabhupada was speaking those kinds of words.
Mm-hmm.
And the modern, that would mean, modern context, we don't think that way. And, so, we could just kind of like put that to the side as that's a cultural thing from the oldsters.
Mm.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Just understanding that every period of time has its own set of like culture and
okay.
set of morality almost.
Okay. How do you answer that question? You get that question?
One time, actually, a young college student, she came and she said, I want to join the Krishna consciousness movement,
But
I can't I can't accept these statements, and therefore I'm not willing to join. And particularly, she was concerned. She was a philosophy student, so she had gone really in depth. All the statements. From the most controversial to the least controversial, and at that point, just to help her start the process of Krishna consciousness, I said, well, this is not the core of the Krishna consciousness philosophy. So you don't have to accept it. I mean, maybe it's right or it's wrong, doesn't matter. And, just start chanting and take the philosophy. And there's, some devotees who may agree with you, and there's differences of opinion. So just helping her realize that this is not the essence or the most important part of our philosophy. It's not the key statements. And then she became a devotee. She started chanting and all these things. And then after a few months, I asked her, I said, so what do you feel about Prabhupada's statements? Do you still dislike Prabhupada? Because initially she was like, I don't like him because of these. So I said, do you still, have any? He said, no, Prabhupada is amazing. He's so wonderful. And somehow I feel the statements are right. They're okay. They're good. So I realized that his statements are something that needs to be, again, Prabhupada's. They need to be understood through the heart of devotion. Then we don't see that he's when we don't know who a devotee is, if a materialist says that, then it's something very offensive. But when Srila Prabhupada is saying that, and we understand who Srila Prabhupada is through the lens of devotion, then it changes the heart. So that was just kind of a side thing I wanted to make. But in general, I would say that what Srila Prabhupada is saying needs to be understood in context, and at times I even thought, oh, maybe Prabhupada is wrong, but I understand that no, he's right. Like, he is right, but we cannot misapply his statement. Like, he's saying things that are on the, it's hard for a man to say these things, but like his statements are in the material context, in terms of the material psychophysical nature, like my mother was saying, there are differences, and so what he's saying is true. He's making us understand those things, but spiritually, everyone is a spirit soul and much higher. But I can't explain this to the academics. When the academics say yeah, it's possible, like what Mataji said, it's cultural context or this or that, because it's almost like we know they won't understand. Like that girl, at that point, there was just no way. There's no way I could make her understand what she wanted to hear, that was someone agrees with her. So when she heard that I was saying, yes, your point of view is fine, it's good, then she was at ease. But then later on, she was willing to
accept it.
Yes.
You what?
I wanted to say something about this.
Can you wait? I want to say something. And I want to see if others have comments rather than just the back and forth. Because it's a hot spot that we all, from time to time, cross gender hit. Whether it's someone asking a man or someone asking a lady, why is this there? On more than one occasion, there's a two-part. On more than one occasion, Prabhupada said, these kinds of statements apply for those who are not devotees, and those that are devotees, they don't apply. That it transcends these boundaries and these characterizations. When one becomes a devotee, then the men and the women are equal. This applies to people who aren't devotees, and there's distinctions. And and the way that Prabhupada functioned, and aside from what he would sometimes say or write, he, by his conduct, was so kind to ladies, even at the risk of being criticized by his peers and others that were not his peers. In many ways, because he stood by the transcendental position of a Vaishnava. And so women can receive Gayatri Mantra, women can worship the deity. And he made some exceptions because of cultural sensitivity. A classic example, anyway, there's many classic examples. Allowing women to worship the deities on the altar in the West, but not having that same standard in Mayapur and Vrindavan. He's still in kirtan. Or I really like this passage when during the Kumbh Mela, the Prabhupada's health was a wreck, and he was in a place where there wasn't heat. It was bitter cold, etc., etc. And he was, the devotees were really worried about his condition. There's just a short paragraph. Kaushalya brought Prabhupada a sweater, and it was a very soft cashmere sweater. And Prabhupada saw the sweater, held it to his cheek, smiled, and said, "You should go start a temple in Bangalore." And she, at that time, she was probably 22 years old. Anyone else that has a response to the question, how is this spoken by such an elevated person, or why is it in his books? Anyone? How do you two respond to that question? Why is Prabhupada speak demeaning things about women? Why does he write it and speak it? And how do you answer that question? That's the question.
I haven't been asked.
You haven't?
Well, not about the why is Prabhupada saying this about the women part. I've been generally asked, why is Prabhupada making this statement, whether it's
Specific about women, though, right?
yeah.
So when that question is asked, how do you respond?
But one thing I've always considered is the context.
Okay, same.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what typically gone with it. If we weren't there, we don't know the exact context, but we take that.
Well, her question is a little different. It's culturally, Prabhupada came from a certain era and a certain way of viewing the world and viewing sociology and things like that, and that's the place where that statement is coming from, the context, not specific circumstances. Same.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you say when that's asked?
I think it's just kind of what you said. I just like when Prabhupada came from.
Ta-da!
Prabhupada, there were so many instances where Prabhupada was so extra merciful to women, like kind of what you were, and he gave
Yes.
extra. He let women serve on the altar when
All kinds of things.
yeah. So I just think of that. I've never been asked, but when I think when I think of that question in my head, then I think
What he wrote and what he and his conduct and behavior were quite different than what he wrote.
Mm.
One of the favorite stories I heard. I had very little association with Jamuna, and it wasn't towards the final few years that she was around that we had a Japa retreat in Ojai, California, and she attended it. And so she's, just, do you mind if I come and sit? I haven't had the opportunity to speak with you. Is it just that she just sat down and we just started talking? She's very, open, very courageous and bold. So she started telling some Prabhupada stories, and one of the Prabhupada stories was the heart-melting kindness that Prabhupada showed. He asked her and one other lady to come and be a participant in some program, a preaching program, and so he made the arrangements for their train travel. The two ladies got on the train, as trains in India are always, super late. When the train arrived to the destination, Prabhupada was standing on the platform with two garlands waiting for them personally. And he garlanded them. He personally applied sandalwood paste to their foreheads. He personally took them to their room. He showed, because he had made the arrangements for their room accommodation, and that made sure that everything was the way that it should be, and showed them, this is where you'll be staying, and treated them like VIPs. And, her heart melted. The person who she's serving is treating her like a queen. Unbelievable. And, one who's taking care of the centers and disciples and things all over the world, standing on the subway, train platform with garlands, waiting for the train to come. Unbelievable. Okay, now it's your turn. You didn't forget. I'm sure you didn't forget.
I can say it was just.
But there's some remote people that may not be able to hear if you just say.
Krishna Maharaj.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a question which is an extension to this only, because as Shruti mentioned, that it's you can explain it as a cultural and an era thing. But I have come across some women who are from India and much older, so we would expect them to be understanding the cultural and the traditional roles. And it was very hard to get through to them. So yeah, it's just an extension to the question.
Nice try.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes and no. I mean, I would say a stronger no than a yes. For example, it's very common to see cultured Indian people where the lady walks behind her husband. And no, it's just culture. No, not everybody does that, but I've seen it many, many times. It's just, taking that role, the subordinate role. I mean, there's other things to say. Okay, any other topic that somebody would like to bring up besides this one? I got into it because of something that you said from Devahuti and Kapila Dev and third canto Bhagavatam.
I was thinking that, to that cultural point that Shruti made, is that when people say that, then the point is that, okay, the culture was different at that point, that era, but then what's happening today? We see the results of, so the principles are there. Now, how much can we, so the higher principles are there, and it depends on how much we can follow. But the principles don't change.
That's
It's
nice.
always it's the highest principle, and
Yes.
and those principles help us to live peacefully and happily in those
yes.
roles.
Yes.
And if you don't follow them, then this is what we'll get, what we are getting today.
Yeah.
And Maharaj, your point about the people, it only applies to devotees, and it doesn't apply to devotee women and men because they are spiritually equal. It was very valid because I've seen in my life, that the qualities that Prabhupada mentions for both men and women, if they're not devotees, it totally matches the description that Bhagavatam gives. The qualities, it's just so true. And then, but as we spiritually advance, then obviously those qualities go away. We don't exhibit. But sometimes we see, even as devotees, when we are not completely purified, those qualities we can be seen, and even for men, But it's all, so it's, what to me is like very accurate, what Bhagavatam says. And it's up to us what we can follow.
You get some people that won't follow because it says the wrong things. Anything else? You have something?
My question was related to the previous class, Maharaj. If anyone has, I can wait for that. It's not today's class, it's yesterday's class.
Did you get to speak? You said your part? Okay. Go ahead, say.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yesterday's class, you have shown the Gaudiya Math logo.
Yeah, you like that?
Yes. I like the creativity in that, how so many aspects are being put into one logo, especially in those times. But one thing that I kind of felt was that we have been following all of those aspects of the logo, but where in the center it said Om. In ISKCON, we don't follow or emphasize or anything to, we know in
The emphasis
mention-
is sound. It's Nama and then there's Om. It's just spiritual sound. So don't get lost. It's not like saying everyone should chant Om. That's not the idea.
Oh, okay.
It's spiritual sound. It's just a sign that everybody knows what it means. It's spiritual sound. Pranava. Shabda Ke Purusham. That's Krishna.
Okay, but the Gaudiya Math did not
No.
anything. Nothing.
No, they don't go tell people to go chant Om. No.
Just one.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Online anything? Yes? No? Okay.
Maharaj, I'm kind of lost on the statement, do not accept money from the materialistic people, and also the Yukta Vairagya principle.
Is that it? That's
Yes.
pretty short, concise. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was, as you know, with King Prataparudra, although he was a Vaishnav, he was making a point about those in the renounced order dealing with worldly people, although he was a Vaishnav. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made that statement to his name again? Kamalakanta Vishwas. The next line says everyone was even in their dreams they wouldn't consider. So it was a warning to, particularly for renounced persons, to be interested in engaging themselves with materialistic people for the sake of aggrandizement. It's a very similar point, almost identical point made in Manashiksha. It's one of the internal contaminations that blocks Raga Bhakti, is where persons, I mean, the language of Raghunath Das is bathing in donkey urine, is going the person who is a renunciate, instead of giving their time and energy to those persons who are innocent, they go to materialistic people for wealth or position or fame or recognition or something. That's the kind of thing. That's my understanding, at least, because, gosh, the Goswamis built temples. And they built temples with wealth from wealthy people. I mean, how many times have the Govindaji 7-story temple was built by one man who was a king. It was a great warrior, Rajman Singh. So, Yukta Vairagya. The caution was going forth to such people with the idea of, aggrandizement and becoming comfortable or whatever. That's the concern. I mean, Prabhupada engaged his disciples in engaging wealthy people with becoming life members. And they would target people that had the means to do so. And there was strategies, etc., but it was to engage in Prabhupada's consciousness. His explanation was, rather than letting them use their wealth in some licentious activity, let them use some of their wealth in service to Krishna for their benefit. And then in reciprocation, we give them books. But it was a strategy to engage their wealth in Krishna's service as opposed to licentious behavior, sensual, degraded behavior. That's Yukta Vairagya.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. I think we're done. You have something. Good.
Regarding the discussion on chastisement, that the points that you're making about
Mercy.
yes, mercy and chastisement at the end. One thing that I've sort of maybe appreciated over time is that it's like in the case of the spiritual master, it's more important. Sometimes the spiritual master may be just wanting the disciple to be obedient, or it's more important to be obedient or loyal to the spiritual master than even using the best means of propagating Krishna consciousness. Like there's a story of Mother Yamuna and George Harrison, Yamuna Devi and George Harrison, Srila Prabhupada, where George Harrison once offered Yamuna Devi the offer that if you join me, I'll make you one of the most famous artists or singers in the country. And strategically speaking, I think it would have maybe been very powerful for the movement if she would have become a world famous singer. But she tells him, no, I just want to stay with Srila Prabhupada and I want to serve him. So is that true for our case, that it's a main thing that our meditation should be obedience to the spiritual master? The propagation is secondary. Whether or not, it's having a powerful effect or not, or even if it's the right thing to do or not. Of course, it can't be something outlandish that we have to use our common sense, but even if it's not the best thing for the preaching, but if it's the instruction, then we follow it.
Well, my answer to that is it depends. It's not, a cookie cutter formula. sometimes people engaged people in preaching that weren't so obedient. Sometimes he curtailed people from preaching because they needed to be more obedient. So he varied his approach to, it was very customized and person to person. There's, in other words, there's so many stories, and out of the so many stories, you can cherry pick ones over here, or cherry pick ones over there, and say this is it or that's it. But the fact is, it's quite diverse. How Prabhupada would encourage people. I mean, just in that particular example, Prabhupada told George Harrison, better that you don't become an initiated devotee, you just sing. Now, what did that mean? Why did he say that? Some assessment of the person. Not that George Harrison wasn't sincere. Prabhupada wasn't interested in, having, a big name disciple. He wanted, spread Krishna consciousness through your fame and the gift that Krishna's given you. But boy, was from what I've understood, particularly from Yogeshwar, he was a devotee through and through. And he would regularly give beads and bead bags to his friends. Anyway, he was a devotee. Initiated or not, he was a devotee. And the way that Jamuna told me the story, she told me the story, George said, if your voice is wonderful, if you like, I can make you famous. And I know how to do it. And she said, let me think about it. And then she came back and said, actually, I don't want that lifestyle. I just wanted to sing for Prabhupada and sing this way. Then he proposed, then let's make an album. That came the Hare Krishna album, or the 45. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.